Well, I see. Well, okay, this is why you should hang out more with the Alliance for AI people who you have in the room with you, or they will be there very soon, or reach out to more of us on the call because this is the kind of information we try to share. So, if I can move my page here, hopefully it has loaded up for you as well. Last July, we posted the first map of the Africa AI ecosystem. Confirm that you can see it on your side too. Yes. Can you see the map on your side as well? Fantastic. Right. So yes, last July we posted this map. It's the first map of the Africa AI ecosystem. This was eventually referenced by the likes of UNESCO, UNICEF, UN, and many other global bodies who, for the first time, probably like just like you, they finally got a single view of what all of Africa was doing around artificial intelligence. You can see on the map the Nigeria space, right? Where you see the likes of Opemipo in healthcare or Minds.io providing services to banks and many other ones. And then you can expand beyond your Nigerian shores to South Africa, Kenya, Tunisia, other countries and see what they're doing with AI. We're able to grab all this information and put it up here so the world can start to see more of what Africa is doing. So my hope is that we can keep continuing to work together so that you might become even more successful than you are today and become part of the next version of this map. Okay, that would be a great win for all of us on the call. And so once again, I'm Alex Sado. Before founding Alliance for AI, I spent most of my time at Nvidia, where I got the privilege to deploy most of the GPUs you use on the cloud today. So if you've used any GPUs on the cloud, those are my babies. But as you know already, I grew up in Benin and only moved to America for school. So on this sheet, you'll find that we've been able to assemble experts from leading organizations across the entire world, all of whom are passionate about sharing their experiences with you so that you can excel as well, since we're all Africans and the only way we will excel is to share our expertise with one another. On this page, hopefully you're seeing it too. You find folks all over the world, right? From Boston, California, Zimbabwe, and Nigeria as well. Folks who are from Harvard University, Benevolent AI, School of AI in Zimbabwe, and InstaDeep and Venture Garden Group. And so we're really looking forward to this session and all the information that we can share. In terms of a short program, you received this before the call. Oh, but I'll just reiterate it where we sent you a survey. Thank you for completing that to find out, things you're interested in talking about. And so now I'll go ahead and spend maybe a little less than 15 minutes, given we didn't start it very early, to talk about, just expand your view of AI and and tell you how Alliance for AI fits into that. Spend a chunk of the time talking through the challenges that you have. I mean, this is a clinic, and we will act like doctors and try to answer your questions. And then finally give you a guided tour of the platform so you learn how to use it. So you might be able to better answer those questions that I asked at the beginning about which African governments have AI policy and how many startups are on the continent at least have identified as using AI or machine learning. And then very importantly, it's good to know that 2 weeks after this is optional, but then you can sign up for a 30 minutes office hours with any of us on the call. And that's why it's good to perhaps take a picture or take notes of the page with all the advisors so you can check on it later on and see who you'd like to reach out to. At the end of all of this, we'll also create a report on how you're able to use the service. And so now let's jump into this whole artificial intelligence thing. For me, I see AI as a tool to see the world clearer. Tosin, were you going to say something? Okay. So yes, I see AI as a tool that is used to see the world clearer. It's been enabling people make a lot of decisions more accurately and a lot faster. I usually tell people to, don't think about Terminators and killer robots and autonomous cars, flying cars. Yes, those are robots are some use of AI, but they are really distractions and used for propaganda to speak about types of AI that is not, necessarily in front of everybody. But very simply, you can think of Google. I want to believe everybody in the class have used Google, and most of the world has have used that that tool. That is AI, and we've been using AI for a very long time. Can you imagine before Google, if you needed to find any information, you would have to try and find someone who knew about that piece of information, and you will still not be 100% sure they got the answer correctly. That could take anywhere from 10 minutes to 4 hours to many days, right? But with Google, in 1 sec, you enter your question, and in 1 second or less, you get an answer. So that's AI in action. It's completely reduced the time, made it extremely fast and more accurate. It's been able to do that, as you are aware, since you've all started to use some machine learning and AI. It's been able to do that because it's had a look at billions of records in the past of images, of text. It learned, and then it was ready to answer your questions, what we call inference or prediction. So that is more of the AI that I subscribe to when I speak to folks. And so it's transforming the world, really. The two ways it transforms the world that I care about, I picked this up from some news channels. It's really in terms of automation and providing new access. On the automation side of things, you have, robots coming into factories and, taking over repetitive tasks and making them happen a lot faster and minimize error. Now, this is a great, important use case, saving companies billions of dollars. But then again, the folks with propaganda keep pushing this story and saying AI is going to replace millions of jobs. It's interesting, but that is just one side of the story. And so that's why I really tend to get folks to really focus on the second side of the story, where it's about new access, especially in developing world like Africa. I mean, in Nigeria or Benin City where I grew up, I mean, how many factories are there that they're going to replace workers? I don't think there are many. So I don't think it's actually our problem in Africa, in my view. I don't know if the other folks on the call have other opinions. We shouldn't be thinking about jobs that get replaced in Africa. It's more about the new access that is possible with this technology. As I mentioned before with the Google piece, before Google, it would take you many minutes, many hours, or many days to find the answer to your question, but now you can get that answer in 1 second. That has created so many jobs for a lot of people, I'm sure. The woman in the picture you can see, she's a bit disabled, but with this chair, she's now able to participate in sports or perhaps even get a job. Millions of jobs can get created with this. The last example here is in the space of finance, right? You people might be familiar with the numbers. It says that only 20% of Africans receive loans today from banks. It means the other 800 million people have no access to loans. Now, for me, I don't blame the banks here because banks have to trust you before they give you their money. And before technology and AI, that trust only came from being able to provide a collateral. And collateral most times meant a mansion. And so if you have a mansion, why are you looking for a loan, in my opinion? But with the advent of AI, fintech, machine learning, credit scoring, you're now finding that AI is providing a new way of learning to trust people by looking at their history of their payment information and then trusting them with a loan. And so I say, if AI is able to provide loans to 50 million more Africans, that can sure translate into millions of jobs. So new access. So this is where we should really focus on. And so to tie it all together with Alliance for AI, we are this community of communities in Africa that helps bring all the information together so you all can find it and the rest of the world can find it as well. Before I jump into the platform, you can already see, I think this is a page you might want to take a picture of, where you can follow us on any of the social platforms from Twitter to Instagram and LinkedIn. It's at Alliance4ai, or join the newsletter where we try and keep you up to date with everything that's happening in Africa and the world that's important every 2 weeks. Right there from the homepage, you will very, very quickly find the momentum box where we show you all the schools that have signed up on our platform saying that they teach AI. We show you all the startups that have signed up on our platform that they use or build AI. You can click on the numbers and go to a page where you can search for more. Or you can find stories on how people are using AI in Africa, right? I'll go ahead and simulate clicking on the startup button, and you will find that, you know, that's the startup page where, like I said before, you can either search with their name, their industry, or their location. Like you can select Nigeria in that drop down box, and you will see all the Nigerian AI startups as of today. You can also click the request to add new startup button, which I'm hoping most of you click at the end of today. And then our team will review what you've entered, and if it makes sense, we'll keep it on the platform. If it doesn't, we'll work with you to ensure you're actually using machine learning or AI before we have it listed on here. The second image is about success stories, where if you click on the inspiration button at the top, it will bring you to many options, including seeing stories not of how you describe your solution, but this is more about how a customer who has used your product describes their experience. So if you have customers who are using your products as well, I encourage you to add your stories there as they will get seen by people not just in Nigeria but other parts of Africa, in America, in England, as we have reach in all these places. Well, so what are you guys in the class trying to do with AI? I looked through the survey and I found that, some of you are trying to reduce the level of traffic in Lagos. Although that picture is not from Lagos, but traffic in Lagos is the same as everywhere else, and so they're trying to reduce that traffic. Other ones of you are trying to reduce the mental health issues that come from sitting in traffic. So, well, thank you, because those are pretty tough. The other ones are looking into facial identity and how that helps with increasing security in settings. The other last two pictures is about one of them is about pipelines and theft that happens there and how you can use AI and machine vision, computer vision to detect such activities. While the last group of folks are trying to improve learning by personalizing the experience for students. So these are all incredible desires that you have, and I hope we can help you get closer to it by the end of this. If we were to think about it step by step, the end-to-end AI, most people think of it in this format where they, the different versions of this, where they say, okay, you find the problem, you find the people to hire, you find the data, you clean it up, you store it, you access it, and then you build some algorithm with all the complex math that there is. I think, yeah, folks on this call have been playing with algorithms for a long time, so you can ask them all the questions you want. Taurean especially, and everyone else too. And then the compute, you think about where you're going to run it and run it as fast as possible so you're not wasting days, weeks, or months for it. And then you eventually deploy it on a phone or anywhere that makes sense. But I want to shatter this view and expand it some more beyond just the technical side of things. I want you to think of AI, end-to-end AI, in a non-tech versus tech lens. On the non-tech side, these are folks who are actually making the decisions. So we absolutely have to involve them in our talk about AI. I mean, some of you in the rooms are possibly not the CTOs of your company. You're probably the CEOs, the business side. But you need to be in this conversation to talk about AI because you're mostly thinking about how are you going to use this technology? If you're not using it, how is your competitor using it? I mean, imagine going to an exam where you come with your pen and paper, but your competition is using a scientific calculator. You're definitely going to lose that exam, right? So you have to create a strategy. As a government, you should think about the opportunities it's going to bring for your people, also the risks that get introduced as well, because nothing is always completely good. There are always risks. And then you create policy to mitigate on some of this. On the technical side, which I imagine you've spent most of your time before now, they're mostly engineers who are users of the technology or researchers who build the technology. On the engineering side, I already saw that some of you were using APIs for your solutions. The engineers don't necessarily need to know so much about the AI underneath. They just need to pick up the APIs on language, vision, and sound and introduce these capabilities into their applications. You can get this from many providers, both foreign ones like the cloud providers like Amazon, Google, Microsoft Cloud, or even the local ones like DeepQuest. DeepQuest was a member of the CCHub program last year, and I tell you, DeepQuest was an incredible company on a worldwide platform. They're building incredible vision software, and I hope members of your class are also building incredible software that I can speak about next year. On the researcher side, you can either build things from scratch or you use AutoML tools to make it easier. With the AutoML tools, those technically, help you kind of figure out, they give you abilities to drag and drop, or they automatically select the frameworks for you and make things a bit easier, right? But then if you wanted the flexibility of doing things yourself, you can do it from scratch. But then you need to know all the math and all the algorithms like we mentioned before. And that's where the green box from before comes in, right? And so now we switch base a bit to start talking about the issues you highlighted, right? What I saw on the responses to the survey are that everybody talked about data as their issue, which I guess speaks to the fact that maybe you're starting your AI journeys and you're trying to find the data and figure things out. But then I hope that also means that you have no issues with everything else, right? If I was to use my mouse here,
My name is
you
Sean.
found the people you want to hire,
For me, my
you
CV,
figured out all
as
the
well as
math that
some
you need
other
to
partners
with the
of ours,
algorithms, and you know where you're going to run it. It's
data.
GPUs are
Because
cheap for you. You
usually,
can build your own
when we are trying to
clusters
solve a problem,
in
we need
house,
to know data
or
that is
you have already
reliable.
secured the
Being
cloud credits, or
predictable, it means
you
that
have
we
the
have
money
to
to pay for
start
cloud
with
to be able to
generating
run the AI, and then finally
equations
you know
and
where you're going to
generating what we
deploy
do
it.
in data
Since no one mentioned that they have issues
visually.
here, they only talked about
And
data.
especially
But
when
if you change your mind here, you're also free
because of deploying
to
without
share
having
with us
data,
as well. And
it's
so
very,
with
very.
that,
For
let me
instance, we have
see.
different
Before I
data
switch to the
is
next
one
slide
part
and
today. I think they are
have
building
Nick talk more
they
about
are
data,
building
I'll give
technology
you
for
guys in the
something as
room
various
perhaps
reliability for pipelines. And
30
that
seconds
means
to
for
one
them to
minute
actually
each. Can
know
you please,
what for their
maybe
models to know exactly what
3 to 5 people, can you please maybe
vandalism
share
will look like.
more
They have to
on what the
have
challenges you're
data on
facing
vandalism at the
around
scale
AI?
that they need.
Can you please do
And
that?
this
And it'd be great if
vandalism
you could
is
use a
already ability
microphone
for
as well so we
vandalism,
can hear it
or they have
properly
to
on the call.
give their systems to acquire that data first, and then start
Tosin, if you can
classifying
help
that data
coordinate.
before they use it to train their models. So that's why data is really important because we don't really know. We people do. We see people do. I try to simulate. They try to acquire images
Yeah,
from
so
other
is my
people. They
question
try
clear?
to just
And are there
generate images
takers
themselves.
who want to answer?
They have different methods that we use. Internally, some of us also, personally, sometimes I just generate things, data that looks like what I what I expect to see in different classes. It takes a long while trying to generate because you have to think about each feature. You have to think of what it means and all of that. Trying to generate data. Generating data is not the best way because it won't allow you. If I can take that, can you hear me? Yeah, so this is Lord CTO at Appruve. So, I mean, for us, one of the challenges we face has to do with the quality of data, particularly for
OCR extraction. So one of the things we do is to allow the user to submit like a picture of the ID document. Then we do an OCR on the ID document to extract the PII details.
I will
And
allow you. I
most
will
of the
allow you
issues we
continue,
realize
but
has
does
to
that
do
mean
with
they
the
have to
quality
hire people to vandalize
of the
pipelines
images
so
that
they can
come
take
through.
pictures of
And so sometimes the OCR extraction is not really successful.
them?
And so, I mean, largely, I think that's one of the issues we face. And so those are, my thoughts regarding to some of the challenges that we face now. Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the
Okay.
challenges I'm
Well,
having
keeping to
is
the
the
rules, I think
fact
we've hit
that
1 minute and I'm timing it
size.
here.
So
So
we
thank you
have to
very much.
get that
Let's see. Any
the
other
strategic
comments on this? It'd be good to get
practices
two
in our
more.
system.
You could talk
So
about data as
one of
well,
the
or
main
if you
challenges
now
we're
see
trying
that there are
to
other challenges you have, perhaps
really
about
discover
accessing
in the
compute,
future
please share
is
as
when
well.
a child takes a particular test, like how do we determine the next set
Yeah.
of questions, recommended questions that the child needs to really go through to understand how the experience they had been. For instance, a child that probably took a particular practice and failed certain courses, like certain topics to be precise. So how do we generate the next type of question that the child is going to practice to be, it should be sentenced enough that it's going to be maybe probably simpler questions based on the level at which the child was from the test that was taken. So the most thing is just simply intertwine, like learn if you fail this, these are the type of questions you should be saying. I hope that is clear. I should just give a scenario of like YouTube, for instance, if I stand up on YouTube for the first time, so based on probably my Gmail account,
Okay.
my
Thank you very
age,
much.
my location, and other
Only
requirements,
one or two
it
others.
gives me some recommendation of videos that I'll be interested in. Like probably based on my age, probably showing video of
Oh, it's
Davido and Whiskey,
yeah. Any one or two others
a
want to
video
comment
of
on this or any other challenge?
Amara and all those good people. So the questions, when you take the questions, like the recommendation that ought to come after that, there should be identified questions.
Yeah. Hey, Alex. Do you mind if I make a quick comment on this? Awesome. So this pipeline is very much what people like to simplify your end-to-end AI on. But one of the big challenges for the future is the feedback loops that this pipeline requires. So as you know, the AI that has to work for people, or the AI solutions, I should say, that have to work for people, require you to have a more agile mindset where you're not going to just train and deploy a system and then just throw it out to the world. There's a lot more testing that's going to be involved, especially for people of our color. And this is something that companies routinely forget to do. And thus, especially in countries where it's a little bit more heterogeneous in the tones, you'll notice that entire populations are left out. So one of the things I like to encourage is that as you build and deploy and train your systems, train and deploy your systems, that you do lots of user testing. Your customers, your most important is the
Awesome.
most important
Thank you very
goal
much
in
for
mind, the
that.
satisfaction of
And
your customers.
before I
And
shift away from this
your
page, feel free
actual
to take a picture of it
your
if you
actual
need it.
models that come out
And is there
may
one
not
more
support
comment?
what you
Or if
need
there's none, I will just continue.
or what the customer needs in order to
Yes.
meet their end
Oh
goals.
yeah, go ahead
So
actually.
keep
Yeah.
talking to your customer and then keep feedbacking. I'm sorry. Keep talking to your customer and always come back and iterate on this data. One of the things that I liked about with some of the GPUs that we're using and the NVIDIA products that we're using is because we move so fast, we're able to iterate a lot, have faster iteration cycles, and thus enable you to create better, richer models and also ask better questions of your data. So whether or not it's like, with COVID coming out and starting to hit the world, the data is very sparse and it is very aggravating to make some sense out of it. But the ability to bring in more context and iterate with new context on these GPUs has helped, help Hopkins University and a few other places actually start to answer some of the more pressing questions that we have. Yeah, represent Caribbean.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Alex, are you going to be presenting on your end, or should I turn over to mine? Can I? Wrangle. Okay, so then I'll just say next slide if that's okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? This is mic test 1 2 1 3. Can everyone hear me? Please nod. I think I can see people in the room.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, as Alex mentioned, Nick Litombe from Cameroon, but now I'm based in New York, and I also am affiliated with some institutions in Boston. I'm actually in my current role as a data science lead for a biotech AI company based with headquarters out of the UK.
Yeah.
So this is
that's
an
an incredibly
interesting
great
time
point.
for us
I will
because
actually
of
even go ahead
the
and make some tweaks to this
coronavirus.
to kind
In
of
fact,
reflect that.
using
And for
our AI
completeness,
platform, we're
that
able
was
to
Taurean
release
Dyer
a
speaking.
paper in the top
He's
medical
a technical
journal
product
about a possible
manager for the
remedy using
Rapids
existing
machine learning
drugs
platform at Nvidia,
for
and also from
the
Trinidad and Tobago, if
coronavirus.
I'm not wrong.
So
Correct?
it's both. I mean, it's a
Nice.
time that is exciting
Wonderful.
for some of us in this
Well, all right.
space
I will
of
now
AI
introduce
because
another
you have
member of the
a
expert team
means of
here, Dr.
impacting your world and
Litombe
of
from
solving real-life
Cameroon and based
problems.
in
But I
Boston, New
think
York
one
now.
thing you have
Nick,
all realized is that
over to you
you
to talk
need
about some
data,
data
right,
strategies.
in order for the machine algorithms to learn and then to apply these learnings and to Torian's great point, have a feedback loop. Something that
Perhaps
I will
I'll
address
keep it on
actually
here,
in my
given
later
that
slides.
Tosin had to,
Next slide, please.
switch the screen. Yeah, sounds good.
So, I mean, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but let me just have this quintessential slide to make the case for data. I mean, big data is now sort of a relative scale, but the interesting statistics is that 90% of the data created in the world today was created in the past 2 years. At least this statistic was true 2 years ago. I don't know what that number is now, but 2 years ago, it was true that 90% of the data ever created was created in the past 2 years. And that's because as a lot of devices are coming online, thinking about, internet, IoT devices, thinking about the amount of data being generated by you, a user, and by you, a company, as you're also iterating on your own data. Even with so much data created, there's still a lot of value that's left on the table. A survey says that, companies that were able to leverage proper data science were able to reduce their expenses by up to 59%. And these same companies claim that they actually didn't take full advantage of the data that's available, meaning that 88% of the data value is still left on the table. So this means for you guys and girls in the room over there, there's a lot of unexplored possibilities. There's a lot of money left on the table. There's a lot of impact left on the table. Next slide, please. And so I promise we did not rehearse this, but to Dorian's point, the customer comes first,
Okay.
right? And then based on that, you figure out, okay, other things that define, the scale for your company. So how big is your company? What kind of problems are you solving? How can you quantify the scale of the problem you're trying to solve? And one way to look at it is like the scale of the data or whatever business metrics that you can sort of garner from your pipelines. But I think the number one thing would be to focus on the customer. And then based on that, start thinking about like data volume, data velocity, variety, the V's of big data. Of course, data veracity is a big one here. What is the quality of your data? And I think that's something that a lot of you in the room are struggling with. But I'm going to take a big picture view of the entire enterprise of using data to solve problems to your business. And hopefully in the process, when we think about the pipelines of how these decisions get made, I'll give you some ideas about how you start to question your own business, because you have to question, measure it in order to improve your practices. And we're going to talk about it in terms of a technical aspect, in terms of pipelines and decision making, and also from an organizational aspect. How do you now take this decision making into your org to convince stakeholders to do the things that they need to do to satisfy your customers? All right, next slide, please. And so there are two things for the CEOs and also the CTOs in the room that you should be thinking about. I think that maybe the CEOs probably fall under the left category of cost, and the CTOs fall on the right of revenue in terms of new products. But I think there are two sides of this equation to take a look at. So you can look at AI's impact as being able to reduce cost, meaning increasing operational efficiency, being able to come to the better decisions quicker, as Alex mentioned before, and also being quasi real-time, as also Taurean mentioned, in terms of like a feedback loop, right? The quicker you learn from your customer that you're not building the right product for them, the faster it is that you're able to recoup costs and actually get to a product that actually works for them to generate revenue on the right-hand side. So these two sides are very important. And I think as people in this room building businesses around AI, around data, I think you should think of this in these two ways of costing and revenue. Of course, you can go to the revenue side and the product side and look at optimization models, look at machine learning models to build new products, but you should also look at the costing side in ways in which you're actually improving operational efficiency for your organization. Next slide, please. So, and this is a slide that drives the point home of, yes, you are building a product that uses machine learning. You are building a product that uses data. I'm just using this as an example. You should also be thinking about the ways that you are dependent on other aspects of the ecosystem, right? Meaning, for example, compute has been very important for the development of AI. And so this graph from OpenAI, on the horizontal axis are the years, and the vertical axis are the amount of, let's say, compute necessary to actually train these various models. I'm not going to get into the reason why there are two slopes for the lines, the modern era and the first era. But what this slide is pointing out is, as a business that's focused on data, you should be reliant on the ecosystem dependencies. In this case, the dependency is, how is compute power improving for me to actually improve on my business practice? This is like a very popular example because compute power, aka Moore's law, the number of computer chips or transistors really that you can put on a computer chip was doubling every 18 months. And so AI companies were benefiting off of this innovation in order to improve their models to get higher accuracy, to be better product owners for their customers. But something that I would like to think about that ties into something Alex mentioned before and what we at Alliance are thinking about very seriously. Another interdependence might be on a non-technical side in terms of, how are the policies of your government actually enabling your business? here is very clear that compute is doing such a thing, but maybe the policy is actually hampering your business, and so you should be part of the ecosystem building in order to figure out ways in which your business can thrive and also create a pathway for others, if that makes sense. All right, next slide. So now let's get into more nitty-gritty details. A lot of you have gone through this cycle a few times, but let me actually do a zoom out view of a project lifecycle for some of the AI or data products you're creating and the workflows. And then we'll zoom in even further to figure out what are the exact steps. Next slide. So obviously it starts, and this is again what Taurean was mentioned before, you should think about things in terms of loops. In this presentation, you're going to see loops because you need feedback, right? When you have a problem statement, I think the gentleman in the back was talking about a product you're building for education, and someone was mentioning sort of OCR products. But when you start out with a problem statement, that is actually more a hypothesis, right? You are hypothesizing that this problem is a problem that's interesting for your customers, that has a product market fit, but you have to go through this cycle in order to clearly define that problem and test that hypothesis. And so the next step is, okay, well, you have the problem. How am I going to decide whether I'm doing poorly or I'm doing better? And so you need a metric for success. You need a way to quantify how well you're doing. After that, you have to identify stakeholders. This is not necessarily sequential. It's just things you should think about. So people who actually care when you actually create that product. For example, these would be your customers, or it could be your investors, or it could be other ecosystem partnerships that you want to build. Or it could be internally, you know, you are the CEO, the CTO could be a stakeholder, or vice versa. Then a lot of the things that you guys have been saying is we have problems with data collection and data management. There's a dearth of data. And that's actually a very crucial point. I think a lot of companies, even at Google scale, have this exact problem. I mean, it's funny to think that Google has the data problem, but my hypothesis is that they actually still do, because the more data you have, the better models you build, but the hungrier you get to build even better models, and you need more data. So it's almost like you're addicted to a drug, right? Which is data. Some call data oil, but maybe it's some other drug. I won't get into those details. But anyway, you have your data. I think the very first thing is to build a simple model first. I don't think you should rush into building the biggest neural network model to solve your problem. And as Alex mentioned, maybe you're calling an API, you know, in the cloud, and maybe that API is actually running on a fancy neural network model. But maybe you could actually start with a random forest model. Maybe you could start with an SVM. And the reason why that's important is, and we can maybe talk about like this in slightly more detail to answer some of your questions about data. The reason you want to start with a simple model first is simple models usually require fewer instances to train on, right? So the model complexity is correlated with, let's say, a sample complexity. And we can get into maybe the technical details of why that matters. But I think do a simple model first, and then evaluate that model, communicate the results, and then you will find out that the initial problem statement you started out with needs to be refined. And then this feedback loop needs to go on and on and on and on and on again. All right, next slide. So once you're satisfied with whatever product that you've built, and you have stakeholders buy in, that means your customers, that means other parts of the company, and you're ready to deploy a model in production. It doesn't end there, because when you're monitoring your model in production, in the model monitoring stage, you are also generating data, right? And as some of you that are like, writing your pipelines, running your model also generates data that you need to learn on to iterate and give a feedback into how you can improve it. In fact, there are ways in which you can actually use a Bayesian framework to update your beliefs about your current model and actually have a good way of sunsetting old models and updating to new ones. And this requires good model management. And it's still a loop, because you create more data and you learn from that, and you can use that to tune the hyperparameters for your model. Next slide. I'm not going to go into every single box, but I want to keep this in this slide so that you guys can now use this to ask yourself questions, right? So in this path, again, you start from problem statement. This is now a more zoomed in view. You're collecting raw data, you're cleaning it. Now, an important step that maybe some of you guys can explore more, and you girls, is to decide on the data representation. Because sometimes, depending, you might have a little bit of data, but how you represent that data can actually squeeze a lot of juice in terms of your model performance. And that's something that if you have questions, we can maybe discuss. But a lot of you know about all these different steps. But it's, again, a loop. I just want to call out that each individual step, you should have a way of assigning a metric to it so that you're able to measure how well you're doing. Because this, as you're going through the process itself is data generating, is the point I'm trying to drive home. So maybe you can start out with little data, but you yourself are creating data by having a feedback loop. Your feedback loop can be a customer survey. That's data. But how do you take that customer survey now, feed that into, let's say, a Bayesian model, and actually now get a more refined model and use that for hyperparameter tuning, you see? And if you're able to automate a lot of the steps, at first you start by emailing your customers and getting that feedback, compiling those results. Then later, as you get more sophisticated, you're building pipelines where as soon as the customers send feedback, you're able to now automatically incorporate that into your pipeline, right? To, again, get that into the feedback loop. So while you can start out with a little bit of data, you should also think about ways in which in the process of running your business, you're also creating more data that you learn on to become better at operational efficiency. Next slide. Okay, now I've given you a little bit of a flavor of the things you should consider on maybe like the technical side. But I think, you know, some of you CTO types, some of you number crunching types, equation solving types, you also need to think about the non-technical side, as Alex was alluding to earlier. And some of the non-technical stuff and some of the impediments to your growth and your success as a company, a lot of times actually has to do with organizational behavior and culture than the technical thing. So there are two sides of a problem. A lot of times, we technical people, we forget to think about the non-technical part, right? You need to convince one person in your company to buy into your solution so that they become champions, that they're now ready to generate or collect data for you. It might mean when you have a partnership with some other company in the ecosystem, you're able to strategically align such that, you know, you're able to benefit off of each other's data. This is actually more a soft skill. It's a non-technical solution to a technical problem. But one way to think about like a non-technical solution to your data science or your data problems is to think about how you actually use data science in your organization to make those decisions. Okay, so let's look at a few examples. Next slide. So this is just food for thought. Is data. You can be a company of 3 people and each person wears 5 different hats. But at the end of the day, you all have different functions that you fulfill. Now, when you build your model and you have 99%, you know, in your OCR results for your computer vision task, how do you actually use this learning to service other parts of your company, other parts of your organization? Meaning, how does data science and how does machine learning, how does AI make decisions for your business? How does it interface with sales, marketing, product, engineering, to then feed into this feedback loop where you're learning to create better and better products, better and better models, right? So in this particular example, data science could be a consulting capacity, right? So different parts of the company come to data science and say, okay, we have these problems. Can you help us solve it? And then on a one-by-one basis, data science now uses whatever data to now solve the problem or build whatever model to solve a particular business case. This is maybe a consulting model where you know, the data science is at the center of the spoke of the hub, and you then borrow problems from each part of your company. Next slide. Or you can actually have data science embedded in different parts of your company that they're integrated because they have more domain knowledge. This is just something that you should be thinking about because this is also like maybe a non-technical solution for a technical problem. All right, next slide. So you're all sitting in this room because you're leaders in your business. You're leaders in Nigeria. You're leaders in Africa by extension. And so that means we need to have a clearly defined way in which we use the advanced analytical techniques and algorithmic techniques in order to move our business forward, right? So we have to start by defining metrics for success. You need to be able to have a temperature of your business, the number of customers, the average number of times that they interact with your product a day, the total number of requests that are hitting your API each month per day. What is the seasonality of it? You need to be able to have a temperature of your business, regardless of whatever function you're in. You need to create a temperature or a metric for the business in whatever function. So that means you're now able to use metrics to communicate openly with the organization, to create a very open and data-driven decision-making culture. So that way, when you are going down the wrong trajectory or the wrong path, you can be transferring to different parts of the organization, and you can now, based on the data that you're generating yourself, able to steer in the right direction, right? So it takes real leadership to actually move to a more data-driven culture for your startup. But it all starts from, again, people defining metrics for success, and then going back to the chart that I showed earlier and going through that loop and figuring out, okay, how do I now use these metrics to create better models, to get my customer happier, to create new data partnerships, etc. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so in this slide, I just want to again drive home the point that was brought up by Alex. Part of the component of building sort of a good data-driven data-driven decision-making culture is that you need to hire the right people. You need to have the right systems in place. You need to be driven by metrics. You need to be able to have a feedback loop where you're able to update your initial problem statement in a very clearly defined way, right? So you have to have a lot of process and protocol to do so. But there are two things that actually I want to call out in this current slide. It may seem obvious, but how do you know what you want to optimize for right now, right? In the short term, you know that I want to build a model, let's say, that has 95% accuracy, because hopefully you've judged the business significance of that extra, let's say 5% that you spent a lot of your dollars on in order to get the extra 5% from 90 to 5% to 95%. Meaning every incremental improvement in a metric should have a rationale and should have a clear business case. So the question is, how do you get from your short-term optimization to your long-term strategic goals? So your short-term, you're optimizing models, but in the medium term, you're solving your data problems and you're actually trying to be more data-driven. But in the long term, a lot of companies don't know what ultimately will be the long-term gain because the market is moving, because a lot of things are changing. There's a lot of uncertainty. And this is where I want to say that building the right ecosystem of experts, of practitioners, of collaborating with one another gets you to the long term. Short term, you can rely on your technical prowess. You can rely on your API. You can rely on your pipeline. But long term, as long as you have good people that are thinking deeply about these problems, then you will be guaranteed to get to the long-term goal, right, of being a successful company. Because the people are the ones that actually make all the micro decisions that drive a company towards being successful. There are many examples of that. You can look at Google. A lot of the Google products were actually created not because the product manager said, this is what we should create because the market demands it, but just because out of necessity of the business, they were realizing that, I taking the temperature of the business, taking the temperature of the market, they realized there were opportunities and they were able to take advantage of these opportunities. So again, to finalize, you don't necessarily need to know what your long-term end strategy is. But as long as you have good practice, right, in the protocols and you're asking good questions and you have feedback loops to iterate and update your beliefs about said questions and your models and your pipelines, and you're investing in people and you're investing in the ecosystem, you'll be able to bridge the gap between your short-term goals and your long-term strategic vision. So that's all I have for you. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Nick. And is that the last slide? Yes, it is. Well, folks, I'll give you an opportunity to ask Nick more questions, or myself, or anyone else. But to bring this closer to at least running up the slides portion of this, I will just run you through a few photographs I took for you. The first one is really a page on the website. If you were to go back to the Alliance4ai website and clicked on the Learn menu button here, I'll use my mouse. You'll be able to find something called Africa Context, where we try to answer more of these questions that you might have about, how do you find secure data in Africa, or how do you get access to compute, be it free at a discount rate or otherwise, right? So check that page out. A second space we created a while back, but never really used, and this is a good time for it. There's a forums page where if you click on engage, and our forums is a basic forum form that you can play with, and you can ask more questions if you remember something else outside this call, okay? And if we were to move to the next phase, just talking a little bit about other pieces of that end-to-end model. If we thought about computer hardware options, one of the options you can get is a supercomputer in a box that you can put under your table. It costs $420,000, and I think that amount changes, but it's around that figure. And I think every one of you should buy it in the room. Who's ready to go? Yeah, okay, don't worry. Believe in yourself, guys. Very, very soon you'll be ready to buy one of those. Azeez should be in the room. Azeez, please raise your hand. So he's one of the mentors from Alliance4ai. He works for a company called InstaDeep, and they're one of the first to actually buy one of these boxes, right? And they're an African company. They're based out of Tunisia, but have offices in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and England and France. They are now one of the top AI companies in the entire world, not just Africa, in the entire world. And well, I hope this was one of the reasons why, is because they had this box. But they build a lot of incredible things, and you should chat with Azeez afterwards. Other options are around, just really powerful laptops that allow you process your work incredibly quickly. So you're not waiting hours for your rendering to be done, but it's happening more real time. And then a little more, for getting started is the Jetson Nano, which is like a Arduino or I forget what the other ones are called, but many people are familiar with the Arduino. I remember when I was at Uniben in Benin City, I used to play with the Arduino and build little circuits and radios and things like those. And so this is something like that, similar use of power, but incredibly fast. And I think Opemipo in the room, Ope, please raise up your hand as well. He is probably one of the biggest users of small boards and IoTs, and has built a lot of IoT deployments across Nigeria and West Africa with his former group called Venture Garden Group. And so you can chat with him about that one. And if you want to buy some more of those, we can chat about how you can find your way to discounts or people who would pay for it for you, right? To that end, there's also the Nvidia Inception program. It's like an accelerator, a natural next move after your Facebook journey, where you join this community of startups, AI startups across the entire world. There are over 6,000 of them today. And trust me, you're leaving so much on the table if you don't join this group. It's very simple to apply. If you're able to describe your business case well enough, you would get accepted and get access to
I have a
all
quick
of this
question.
free marketing, all of this free expertise.
Yeah,
You have Nvidia's top
as a startup,
solution architects
would
working
you
with you on your
advise that
problems. If
so now
you're
currently
able
most
to
of the
explain that
cloud
is
providers
important,
have
of
their
course.
own AI
And
services.
sometimes you get
Would
access to
you
free
recommend
cloud
that
credits up
a
to
startup will use these
$100,000.
services or build their
So
own
this is incredible
in-house,
value, and
models,
I
machine learning
encourage you to
models?
join and make me proud, please. Like I really need more African startups to be part of this program, so we can keep showing the world what we're able to build.
What do you need it to do?
And then finally, after you've
So
taken a
it
breath,
basically, if
definitely,
in-house models
help take a
satisfies
picture of
it,
this. You should go back
then
to the
use
Alliance for
your
AI
model
feedback
if
page
that's
and
the
let
only
us
thing that's
know,
available. But if you can
what
get
you
away with something
gathered
off
from
the
this
shelf,
session, what else you would have liked to
that's
improve.
faster for you
Yeah.
as
And
a
of
startup and
course, you
cheaper.
can also sign up for the newsletter if you just want to keep up with
That's.
what
I mean,
we've been
this
talking
actually
about.
related to
And so,
the what do you call it,
after
the
covering all of
OCR. So
that,
Google
I'll
Cloud
go
has
back to
Google
the page
Vision.
where I had all
Amazon
end-to-end
also has Amazon Text
platforms. It's
Tracks.
taken me a while.
And so,
And opening up for
we are
open
using
discussion where you can
both of
ask
them actually,
questions,
depending upon the type
either
of ID
questions for the
document.
general public
So I
or
just
to
just wanted
specific
to hear from you
mentors.
guys, like what you guys think about that.
And in that period of time, I think we'll allow that go on for about 10 minutes, after which most of us on the phone will drop off, and then you guys can continue on the room to have discussions.
Yeah, I think
Definitely take pictures
the
together. There should
response
be a
makes
big
sense.
group
Yeah.
picture of everyone who's
No,
present,
I was going to
and
answer that.
we'll go from there. So I think we can, start asking questions, either folks on the phone or in the room with a microphone. Go ahead. Please.
Mm.
Do any of the mentors on the phone want to take that question?
Yeah. Thanks.
One other thing I'll add to that is you can also use, like let's say, the cloud one to also fine tune whatever one you have locally as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Oh, and Laud, I was trying to ask you a question earlier about where your processing on your OCR actually takes place, on the device or on the cloud. Because you were saying that the images came out blurry, but in my experience with my, we have these powerful smartphones, which you also have.
Oh yeah,
When I do
Taurean, you had a
OCR, it
response to
demands
that, but
it
from my
has a
end,
user
I think
experience that forces the user
it's a,
to actually steady the
yes,
camera to a
and
point
if
where
you were
it
to ask
says,
me as
okay, this is
well,
good enough for
if you
me
were
to
to ask me
recognize.
as well,
Do you
I
have
think you
something like that
could swap
for your
between them
system?
both. I think you should definitely check to
So
see
we
what already
recently
built and
worked
if it works
on
well for
our
your
first
use
version
case.
of an
Take
Android
it.
SDK.
It's been built.
So basically
But then
that's
as
on the
you
client
learn,
side.
especially if you're
But what we did
testing things
initially
out, I
was
don't
just
see why
build
you
an
should
API
build your thing from
where
scratch
you can just
from
submit
day one,
the
or just
documents.
let me
And
know
so
if you
that
think
was where the
differently. You
challenges
can
were.
test with
But
it,
on the
work with your
device,
customers, see what
we were
works, and
able
then
to
figure out
control the
what's off,
experience of taking
and
the
then
picture.
build your own piece, right?
Okay, good.
I spoke
Yeah.
about
So
DeepQuest
keep
of
it
last
on
year.
device.
They started to use the
at least
Amazon
until
Vision API and realized that it was not recognizing people in Nigeria,
Yeah.
right?
Cool.
And so they went back and built their own that performed a lot better. It was called Image AI or something like that. So that's my take.
Actually, he stood up. He just excused himself for some minutes, so he's not very disciplined. Alright, a number of people have been giving me signals that they have questions to ask. So I'm thinking to take their questions as well. Alright, so
We can okay, can you hear me?
All right.
Jesus.
So
Okay,
any
so
other
what I have to
questions?
say, I don't know if it's exactly a question, or let me say I don't know how to put it in a question. But then, everybody has been talking about data. So I'm thinking,
Oh,
is
that's
there an,
interesting. Is everybody
public
tired and trying
site
to go home
look
now?
at data from? Like, for example, my name is Sadiq.
Yeah, because one of the
Simbi.
interesting comments I had before was about the learning use
So I
case
was
and
asking
figuring out
if
how
there's
to,
an ethics to look at
you know,
concerning data.
provide
I mean,
recommendations
everybody
for
talks about
students
privacy, there's
on how to
GDPR and all sort of things.
on what
Is there
classes
a
to
place
take
to draw
next
a
or what
line?
courses.
For example, a lot of people complain about
Yeah,
Google
the
Maps
person who
and
asked before,
having
can
to
you
turn
say
on
more
location
about
app.
that? And
But
perhaps
then you
maybe
still
one of
want a
us here who's
personalized
worked on
experience.
recommendation
You
engines
want
might have
Google to give
something
you
to
accurate
suggest,
timing,
either
but
on
then
the
you don't want to
data
turn
side
on
or algorithm side.
location and so many other things. So about privacy and all. So is there a line to be drawn or something, or is there any kind of
Ah, I see.
ethical
Okay.
consideration concerning collection
But
of
yes,
data
a
and
similar
using the
problem
data?
with other things you're working on. Perhaps you having some issues thinking through what algorithms work best for your solution. Feel free to ask about that. Yeah, just go ahead.
So one thing I know for sure about still comes to privacy is very important. The only
Yeah.
time you need to create an anonymity so that you don't control that. So can you hear me now? Yeah. So
If you
what I'm
can
saying is,
introduce
so
yourself
when
first
it
and your
comes
company,
to
that would be
data
good.
sharing, the ethics actually when it comes to ethics in data, so you should look at
Okay.
creating anonymity for your users. If you look at cases whereby you can instead of using labeling them with their names, you can instead use IDs that make them anonymous. So that kind of creates some level of security for them. They feel safe that they can actually it doesn't make sense for you to just suddenly see your name somewhere and what's this? Get creeped out. So basically creating that anonymity makes it solves the whole problem.
I'll interject here and just say that that's a very good point. Except sometimes anonymity, well, it depends on, as a business,
So that's different
there are
across the
several things to
entire
think
world,
about.
and it's a thing
Do you
people
actually need
continue
that
to
granularity
chat about
in
and
the
try to
data?
figure out solutions.
So,
But
so
eventually,
what was just
things don't
mentioned,
apply to the entire world.
it's a good point
I'll let the rest of the team
because
respond
of
here
anonymity. Maybe when
before I
you're
say
aggregating,
much
maybe you
more.
only
But
need
then,
aggregate
Opemipo
information
in the room, I think
from
you feel
certain
strongly about this.
individuals, and so you
Perhaps
don't
you can
necessarily need
share
to
some
keep
thoughts
track of,
from a Nigerian
all
context
of that
before the
identity.
rest
So in
of
that
us.
sense, you're creating anonymity. I'll just add that when you're creating anonymity, there are different sort of bars, requirements. If you're creating anonymity in the location
If it's
space,
possible to use a
location data space
microphone,
I
it would
used
be
to work
great.
in, and you're following GDPR law, there are several things that you have to be able to do. If you have a user that wants to delete your particular information from your database, even if you've created anonymity, you still need to be able to delete that particular user. So you still need a dictionary of sorts. If you're in the medical space and you create anonymity, and you're following HIPAA law, I think in the US or in Europe, maybe elsewhere in the world, the requirement is more stringent because it's more highly sensitive, and it's been shown that there's some algorithms that can actually still sort through the anonymity, so that that becomes really tough. But a final thing I would say is, what value proposition are you creating for your users to incentivize them to also share that information? There are some companies, for example, a friend is starting a company in which, when you share your private data, you also benefit from that outcome. And maybe like an absolute final thing, being in the medical space, and being required to and some folks like saying, oh, share with me your data, we're going to create solutions, better drugs or better treatments for you. People that look like us are usually very suspicious and paranoid about this, because in the past it's not been very trustworthy. So we also need to find a way to influence policy in order to create regulations and restrictions that people don't take advantage of, our population and our communities.
So one last thing on that. So, as Nick was saying, I also don't believe that companies need as much data as they claim. They kind of just want it. And before I was at NVIDIA, I was a researcher at this company called Accenture in their labs doing future of work. So it's incredible on how much data people have on you, and that how they're willing to use it without your permission. So to kind of take it to an interesting direction, Mozilla is known for their open source work, and they're focused on privacy. And even though Google Voice and Alexa claim, oh, we need your voice, we need this, we need that, they've built deep speech, which has a great model for letting the user themselves decide how much they want to share without detracting from the experience itself. So you can opt out of sharing any voice samples and still be able to, harness a digital assistant. But of course, you don't get certain capabilities like I'm trained to adjust your voice and responding and all the cool stuff that comes with that. Similarly, Google Maps, you can have offline maps, and Google never has to know exactly where you are. And they can still, send you the traffic data, similar to how, the old time GPSs or standalone units can today, where they just send you traffic. And it can still do the mapping.
Well,
but Google just wants to know where you are so that they can do better traffic analysis, quote unquote, as well as, what law enforcement is learning, at least in this country, that you can find where people are and track their behaviors so that, to build your case against them.
All right. My question is very similar to the question they asked. Can you hear me? Okay, I want to ask, for the past 2 years now, I have a friend that is working on a project in the agricultural sector. It happened that they actually abandoned the project because of the issue of data really. So because of that, I've been thinking of something, and I think I need to put it out here today for us to see what is happening, because when you look at it in one way or the other, we are always having issue with data, especially for the startup. Is it very possible that there is something like data developmental framework, whereby if you, as a startup, when you have intention to do any project in a particular sector, you already have something like how your data should look like, the features of your data that should contain, because the quality of your of your algorithm at the end of the whole thing, of the quality of your algorithm is a function of the data you have in feature engineering. So I want to know, is it possible that we come together as a body under this AI and see how we can develop such a framework? It will actually help us a long way. It will go a long way. I don't know if it's possible. So that's what I'm asking. Thank you.
Solid, solid. Well, it looks like we have time for one more question, and then I'll let you guys on the call go. And then, folks in the room, it's up to you at the mercy of Tosin. He can let you sit there and ask questions of Azeez and Opemipo, or he can shut down the room. So yes, any other question?
I'm Lawrence, Vinsighte.
Yes.
Yes.
Way to put her on the spot, man.
Good evening. My name is Yewande, and my company, what we do is we leverage augmented and virtual reality technology. So what I've been doing recently is how we can leverage AI in AR and VR to improve the experiences for our students. But I'm currently in that phase now because I'm trying to figure out how we can do it. And one of the things I discovered is the model AI, but I still don't have a clear understanding of how that works. But once I'm able to figure that out, I think I can reach out to the team about it. Okay, what we do is that we simulate practical experiences for students.
Thank you very much
So
for that
that for
comment.
schools that
It's
cannot
really
afford to
funny.
set up
Nick and
this
I,
infrastructure in
Nicholas,
school,
who's on the
students
call,
have
he and I have a
experience
call in
using our
15 minutes
application to
where
learn
we're going to
about
discuss that
some
with
various
several other
practical
people who are
experiences
thinking about the
across
same
several
issue. And
subjects.
it's a hard question. I don't know if we'll come up with a solution, but if we do, this group will hear about it and to be your idea. What's your name? The fellow who just spoke. Lawrence. Okay, great, great, awesome. All right. Well, before we finally close the call, I don't believe I've heard from the lady in the room, and I think we need more ladies in the room. But this particular lady in the room, anything you have to share, either as a question or a feedback, or at least what you've learned that's interesting today, because we must have you talking. I always do. Wonderful. Yeah, feel free to leverage us and ask questions.
Bye,
But when you say
everyone.
with augmented reality, what are you doing with it right now?
Good luck.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing. Cheers. Okay, with that, I believe that is it. I thank you all very much for being engaging, for being part of this this activity and sharing your stories with us. Hopefully, we'll be able to answer some of the questions you have. Feel free to leverage the two folks who are in the room to ask more questions. Definitely leverage that link I shared earlier on with the feedback to tell us more about what we're doing. I think Tosin can send it to you guys later on. And also feel free to leverage the Alliance4ai website. It was built for you. So if you want to, join the newsletter or add your startup to the platform, go ahead and do that. With that, I will close from my end. That's it from me. Thank you very much. And a round of applause for everyone for staying the whole time. All right. So, Tosin, over to you. I think you might be able to close the call.